the more visible we are about the ups and downs, the highs and lows of our process, the safer it becomes for other people to own all of who they are because we don't unmask just so that we can come get into the AuDHD mask.
ADHD Rewired, episode 548. Since 2014, this has been the podcast for ADHD adults who have really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. You can learn about our coaching and accountability groups, our virtual co-working community, and more. All at ADHDrewired.com. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Learn more about our offerings, including our monthly live Q&As, get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter, and more. All at ADHDrewired.com. And if this is your first time listening, welcome. Don't forget to hit subscribe or follow on your podcast app so you never miss an episode. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Hale, I am really excited for you to hear today's episode. It is a bit of a longer show, but I think you're going to really want to listen all the way through. It is Autism Awareness Month or Autism Acceptance Month. Today's conversation is with Portia Preston, who is a friend of mine that I made last year at the CHAD conference. And we discuss the kind of unmasking and learning that we're not just ADHD or autistic too. This conversation is very sort of exploratory. We're both asking each other questions, and I really hope that you enjoy this. I also share some things that I've been kind of holding close to my chest for a number of years because I didn't really feel ready to share some of these things until now. I feel that this is a very sort of authentic, vulnerable conversation that I'm actually really happy to be sharing with you. I don't want to interrupt it with ads, so I just want to make a quick mention right now that we still have 3 spots left in our spring coaching groups. And I have information on the website of how you can sign up for that. So just go to coachingrewired.com, get your name on the email list, so you can start your pre-registration process and then schedule a one-on-one call with me. Group starts April 24th, but we're looking to fill these last couple spots here real fast. So without any further delay, let me bring you my conversation with my friend and fellow AuDHDer, Portia Jackson. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today we have a little bit of a different show. I think it's going to be kind of a different show. I am joined by I just want to say my friend, friend, colleague, but really my friend. Portia and I met at the 2024 ADHD conference, the CHAD conference. I would say that Portia was kind of my guardian angel at that conference. I was kind of going through some rough stuff, and I don't even remember exactly how we connected.
You were at your table the very first day they had the fair with everyone at their
That's right.
tables. Yeah.
That's right, with talking about the coaching group stuff. And so we connected there, and I was just I think it was like the second or third day, one of the days of the conference. I was kind of struggling, and you were there, and you just helped me so much.
Thank you.
And thank you. I mean, I was literally completely dysregulated and had to give a presentation in the next hour. And I was like, I had literally no idea how I was going to bounce back. And you helped me so much. So I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah, it was our honor. I know what that feeling is like, and I know what it's like to be somewhere and feel exposed and not protected. And you were just so visible
Mm.
that I could tell it was hard for you to get any space to yourself.
I absolutely appreciated that. And it's what we're going to be talking about today is we're talking about autism and ADHD. So we're in April. It is, so I think the official thing is Autism Awareness Month. I like to think about it more like Autism Acceptance Month. But then I was thinking 5 minutes ago, I was like, what if we actually change it to Autism Unmasking Month?
Oh, that's so much pressure.
Okay, so no pressure. No pressure then. Okay. Over the last, at least in the podcast, over the last couple of years, I've been exploring, questioning, maybe I'm also autistic. And which it's just been so interesting for me is a sort of this journey of,
Yeah.
knowing that I'm ADHD from the time I'm 19. When I was after my undergrad, I started working at a therapeutic day school, and originally I was working just with kids that had emotional behavioral challenges, and then I started an autism program. And these kids were kids who did not get kind of any early intervention. These were high support needs
Mhm.
kids. One of them was nonverbal. Both were fairly aggressive, and I kind of just fell in love with like these kids and
Mhm.
there was something that I just felt like there's something I understood in a very intuitive level, and then like after that very first day in this classroom, where I mean it was a battle. Like these kids were real dysregulated, very aggressive, and I went home immediately and just started like researching the hell out of autism. I was like, what is this? Like, because these were behaviors I've never seen before. And so I worked there for, I don't know, a year and a half, maybe. People were requesting to get out of the autism part of the program, and I was requesting to be moved to the autism program. And they were happy to let me do that. And, what at that time, I was like, I know that ADHD and autism are different, but man, I relate to so many things. I wasn't banging my head against the wall when it was trying to transition, but I
Mhm.
totally understood the challenges of transitioning
Yeah.
and any sort of unexpected change. For years, I really thought about, there's so many similarities between autism and ADHD. Then I went to, did my graduate studies, and then my second job out after my master's degree. I was working at a behavioral clinic, and I was working with what. And it's so funny. I still have to sort of like modify my language about it because it used to be
Yeah, you're
so.
trying to not use the terminology that's
Right,
yeah,
because
it's hard.
right. So I'm just gonna state the old terminology so we can like create that bridge. So
Okay.
the high functioning and low functioning autism. Right.
Right.
Okay. So what we now talk about is high support need, low support need, or high masking, low masking.
I find that complicated as well because I think that we all can have varying support needs. And I saw this graphic recently that kind of broke that down. And so it's like there's these different areas that you have, challenges with, and then you have these varying needs of support. And I think it's just really hard for people because there really is no way to like distinctly categorize one person from the next. Right.
Right.
But I think all of that to say the way that I think about all of these topics, 10 years from now, we should have better language than we do today because things are always evolving.
Yeah.
So maybe we give ourselves a little grace and say, we're all still figuring it out.
Yeah. And I think we will always be figuring it
Mhm.
out. It's one of
Yeah.
my favorite shows on NPR, which is I think also just a life philosophy that I have, and that's to the best of our knowledge.
Yeah. And I find that complicated for me because I'm a professor and I'm
Mm.
supposed to know things. And how did I not know this for so long? I mean, at least you knew you were ADHD when you were 19. I just knew that I was overwhelmed and I needed to quit everything and start over. Like,
Mm.
looking back, I'm like, "Oh, that was a thing." But I had so many masks, as a Black woman that had to do with, other societal expectations. This is the last thing that I was even thinking about.
I'm trying to remember where I read this. For people who have low support needs, often have much higher mental health support needs, which makes
Wow.
a
Can you
lot of
say that
sense.
again? I
Y-
wanna
Yeah.
say that
So
again.
people who have what's considered low support needs have
Mhm.
higher mental health support needs.
I feel like you just read me.
Hmm.
Because I've never heard them separated before, and I think that was the struggle I had because I was always going into therapy and being told that I was fine, and I think it's because they couldn't see my autistic support needs, and because those weren't being seen, I had all this internal pressure, and I was having depression and I was having anxiety, but people look at what you're able to do, so that's where the functioning comes in, right?
Yes.
And it's like, well, you're able to do all these things, so you're fine.
And one of the challenges too with even this language is we talk about autism as a spectrum, right? Like
Mhm,
there are, autistic adults who will
mhm.
never ever be able to be independent, who
Mhm.
have, significant intellectual disabilities. And then you have people like portrayed like, Sheldon from The Big Bang. Like, while they
Mhm.
never come out and say his character is autistic, I mean, it's pretty clear his character is autistic,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
it's being that it's such a huge spectrum. I think there's even in the autism community, especially when you're talking with parents of
Yeah.
kids, there's this like weird angst that is
Mm.
like, how could you be autistic? Like, it's you could feed
Oh,
yourself.
and it's so ableist,
Yeah.
and that's not something
Yes.
that I said much about. Someone told me once, "You don't think much about your disabilities in the world until you have one."
Yeah.
And so the past year, I've had people stare me in the eye and say, "You're not autistic. That's not what autism looks like." And I think it's because they're looking at what I was able to do. But you mentioned just now, someone who's nonverbal may be absolutely brilliant,
Yes.
and they're not able to use language to convey what is in their brain. But because they live in a neurotypical society, we label that as deficient.
Yeah.
And it's really us who are lacking in the tools of expression,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think that's a big problem is that people, myself included, because I only knew what I was exposed to. I was nervous to say that I was autistic because I felt like I was immediately co-opting a space that I did not belong in.
Well, I felt that very much too, and a lot of the newer books I've been listening to really talk about like the idea that self diagnosis is okay because it's inaccessible. Like a full scale
Mhm.
evaluation is so inaccessible for
Yeah.
so many.
It's also political.
Say more about that.
Well, depending on what your intersectionalities are, you go into a job and you say, "I'm autistic. These are the accommodations that I need." Well, is my job security at stake now? In a social setting, am I going to lose all of my friends because they don't understand me? We have so much to lose, and we don't have a lot of protections to reassure us that it is okay and safe to live with these needs. I can't tell you how many times I've been on the phone with someone and I have to tell them, "I'm having a hard time processing what you're saying. I need you to slow down." And they think I'm being rude until I say I'm neurodivergent. And then there's like this breath where they remember that they're talking to a human. And I feel weird doing that because I'm like, in so many different contexts, I will get things done so quickly. But if I sit and watch a YouTube video, I'm literally pained by how fast people talk. And I'm
Mm,
like, is it just me?
mm.
And if you don't give yourself grace, you start to feel deficient and it just reinforces the whole ableism all over again.
Currently listening to Devin Price's newest book, Unmasking Life. And one of the things that they're talking about in the book with related to work was that interviews that high masking or low support need autistic folks, when they don't disclose, have worse
Yeah.
impressions. But when they do disclose, there tends to be people tend to perceive them better
Yeah.
versus not. So it's to me that's kind of an interesting thing, and it's like we got to name the elephant in the room for people to be
Yeah.
comfortable with an elephant in the room.
And I think I wonder about what we then do with that information because I don't think the appropriate thing is to tell people, see, then disclosing is going to go better for you. I think we need to look at the optics. Again, look at intersectionality. If they're a Black woman like myself, does it go the same way? I think, if
Mm,
anything, it should be used to train people who are on the other side. This is what you're missing when someone says that they're autistic and you immediately think about what they can't do.
mm.
But I think in order to do that, people like us have to be a lot more honest about what it looks like for us to have this. So, do you mind if I mention the things I'm doing to like regulate myself right now as we talk?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I'm holding a crystal in the shape of a heart, and it just holding it in my hands gives me something to hold, which is comforting. And it also reminds me that I can slow down. I am wearing flippers and I have a blanket. I have numerous blankets all over the house because that texture, right, is really important to me. I have a hot liquid right here next to me to ground me. None of that makes me work slower or in a more deficient way, but it makes it easier for me to show up as my full self.
Mm. You know, going back to the idea of a diagnosis, going from specializing in autism as a therapist, and I remember, what I think one of the things through this process that's been sort of like most humbling, I guess, for me
Mm.
is having these experiences of, maybe 10 years ago. working with other sort of ADHD, specialists,
Mhm,
whether they're coaches or therapists, and they said they didn't have ADHD, and I'm like,
mhm,
come on, like
mhm,
you are as ADHD as they come. And I was like,
mhm.
how is it that these people who are specialized in this field don't know that they also have ADHD? And I used to get those people like internally, totally
Yeah,
just like criticizing them. I'm like, come on.
yeah,
And now here the tables have turned a bit because I'm like,
yeah.
wait, I specialized in this for years and years. I presented on this. I was like
Mhm.
my local community autism expert, right? And it's
Mhm.
like I, wasn't just what was the hair club for men thing? The wasn't just a client, I was also the president.
So, how do you feel about that now?
It's I've always been fascinated by the idea of blind spots.
Right.
When I was in grad school and or my undergrad and just got my ADHD diagnosis, I had also just learned about the concept of the Johari's window, which is a framework of self-awareness and blind spots. And we all have blind spots.
Now you taught me that, but I had no clue what it was, so can you explain Johari's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
window again?
So if you imagine like a four square grid, right? And so in one of the grids is what's called your public self or your arena self, like the things that you know about yourself and other people know about you, right? Then we have our sort of our private self, so the things that we know about ourselves, but other people don't know, and that could be contextual. So it could be like maybe one or two people know, but most people don't. Right. Then in one of the other corners, we have what's called our blind spots, right? The things that people are seeing about us, but we are not
Mhm.
seeing ourselves.
Yeah,
Right. And then we have
yeah,
that fourth quadrant, which is the unknown. And that could either be just because there hasn't been an opportunity or it's not knowable yet.
yeah,
And so what I have learned as someone who was always looking at like self-awareness almost as a core value
yeah.
and seeing that I know I'll always have blind spots.
Mhm,
And as
mhm.
soon as we think we don't, that's when our blind spots are probably bigger.
Yeah,
Because there over the years, like it seems like every like couple of years, I have this big like,
yeah,
oh, right. And it's always painful to kind of realize to see what had been blind.
mm,
But every single time I've gone through something like that,
yeah,
that pain has been turned into strength and healing tenfold,
right,
right? And so I've never been afraid of uncovering blind spots. I've always like been very sort of intrigued and excited to explore those. This was just a big humbling one because like for years, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, there was this article in the Journal of Attention Disorders talking about the high level of autistic traits in people diagnosed with ADHD. And I was like, I've been saying this for years. Like, there's so much overlap, and I'm still just connecting with traits.
yeah,
But I'm like, oh, I don't have like autism.
yeah. Well, I think it's one thing to look at other people's experiences from the outside, and it's another thing to have the lived experience for yourself. And what happened for me is I had a very profound skill regression. All of a sudden, it was hard for me to read, it was hard for me to write, it was almost impossible to focus. And as a professor, as a speaker, as a coach, that terrified me. I had just gone through like tenure and I had really expanded my business. And all of a sudden, I'm like, why am I so irritable? Then it was like, why am I depressed? All these things are happening. And I'm like, something's not right. And for me, it was when I started to go on medication, which I was really reluctant to do, that I was able to see the signs more clearly, and as I started to research them, it was like what I was seeing, like my sudden need for safety foods while I was traveling, right? All these things I thought were flaws, I started to see them as needs, and then I'm, like, resonating with these people on social media who are talking about autism, and I'm like, "But that can't be me because I grew up when gifted just meant you were good at things."
Mm,
We didn't know that it meant you were really developed in some areas and underdeveloped in others. And I was that third Johari's window you're talking about when I think about how I reflect on the past now, it was people seeing something that I didn't. And so they would always, my peers, there's something different about you. And I just thought they hated on me because I was nerdy. But kids can pick out a difference even if they
yeah.
don't know what it is. And I don't think I moved into that fourth window you described where it's like you learn more about what you don't know until I started to sit down and conceive about what does it mean for me to reflect on what trauma I've experienced in my
Mm,
life. Because I was over here doing research on secondary traumatic stress and burnout and reading about PTSD all the
mhm,
time. And like you, I wasn't seeing my own trauma until I started reading The Body Keeps the Score,
mhm,
and I couldn't read it because every single page was just knocking on my front door.
mm,
So I think sometimes it has to be the combination of like knowledge and life experience that brings you to a point where you're ready to have that awakening.
mm. Yeah, it's interesting too. You brought up like trauma, and I've been this in May. It'll be 2 years. I've been doing EMDR, and I think that that process, and I've talked about it on the podcast in the past. It's been, I think, one of the hardest therapies I've ever done, and probably one of the most effective therapies
Yeah.
that I've ever done.
Yeah.
So I was diagnosed with complex PTSD.
Hmm.
I'm right now, I'm been estranged from my mother for, year and a half, maybe close to 2 years. And, part of this realization of that I had been masking for so long is I grew up in an environment that I was often criticized. Whatever I did was never good enough. And, my feelings weren't important because it was her feelings that were the important ones. And it was
Yeah.
my job as a child to be managing her feelings. Right.
Mm.
And something I've actually just have recently kind of realized, I don't know if I was telling you about this or not, Portia, that I think I also may have alexithymia,
Hmm.
where because
Yeah.
when
We
someone
talked about that.
because when someone's like, how are you? I'm like, I always struggle with that
Hmm.
question. And I think
Yeah.
when you grow up and your feelings have been so invalidated that
You're disconnected from
you
them.
disconnect from them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I spend a lot of time to myself thinking about how do I do everything from a place of connection? Because I realized that for so long I was so disconnected and I was just pushing myself through life, trusting that I would land on my feet and figure things out because I frankly had to. And for me, that was intertwined with growing up in South Central LA as a young Black girl who was very cognizant of all the different statistics and determined to not have that happen to her. And so I'm walking on this invisible tightrope. That's my primary mask. And you can argue that it was successful because I on to do a lot of extraordinary things, but I certainly have paid the cost behind the scenes in ways that people would never imagine with my mental health because I didn't know. And I just was told for years, oh, you're too sensitive. And, it was like I felt like I wasn't doing life the right way. And why was it so hard? And when people said, oh, you're so hard on yourself, I'm thinking, isn't everybody this hard on themselves? I heard there were people that don't ruminate constantly, and I was like, "I don't believe you because I've never had that experience." So, I feel like for me, I don't wanna sugarcoat it because I described my diagnosis I was verklempt. I had all the emotions, the good, the bad,
Oh, look at
but
you
it was
using some Yiddish. Oh, for clubs.
verklempt. Yeah, all of the emotions, and it was a long year for me, this past year. Going through my past, and as someone who, like, really has taught self-compassion for years, this showed me I had to go so much deeper than I ever had
Mm,
before, and I was so afraid because I knew that I was shedding the person I was, and I wasn't sure that I was gonna like the person on the other side,
mm,
and so I was resisting it. "I just wanna go back to who I was just, before this diagnosis," and I've told you that the reason unmasking is, like, terrifying for me, 1, I wasn't conscious of a lot of my masks. So when people say that
same.
it's a conscious choice, I'm like, "No, I thought it was this extrovert." And I feel like Humpty Dumpty. All the pieces fell and you can't
Mm,
put them back together. And so now I'm in this new world where I want to fight for me. I want to advocate for myself. I don't want to shame myself. And I fought so hard to get here and I almost lost hope.
mm,
So I'm not willing to surrender that. And that's what keeps me on this course.
mm. That whole idea of, like, not realizing how much you're masking, for me, I think some of I feel over the last, like, 5 years, there's been these, like, different sort of events or things that I've been having to deal with that were kind of like these data points that
Yeah.
all added up to, like, I really probably need to look into this autism thing for real. In 2020, started going through my divorce, and was really at that time already kind of burnt out just from work stuff.
Yeah.
And like through COVID, I continued to live with my ex-wife. My son didn't know until about a week or two before she moved out, and it was just like my mental health in that during that time was
Yeah.
not good. I did what I always do. I sort of dig deep
Yeah.
down and find some more resilience. I
Mhm.
recently heard this term toxic resilience, and
Oh,
I was like,
absolutely.
oh my god,
Mhm.
because I used to say like what when someone's like, what's your superpower? I'm like, I'm a lemonade maker. Give me
Mm.
give me lemons, I will make lemonade,
Yeah.
right? And it's like and it was last year when partially because my ADHD showed up, combined with some people pleasing and
Yeah.
not wanting to have hard conversations, I lost a ton of money in my business. Like, because I
Mm.
wasn't paying close enough attention to the finances as we went from
Mhm.
doing 5 groups at once at a higher rate to the demand as the world opened up decreased
Yeah.
because during COVID, lots and lots of people, stepped into the ADHD coaching space, and there's a gazillion other podcasts out there now on ADHD. How that affected my business is I went from having 5 groups, which required also more support staff for
Right.
that. And as we went from 3 groups to 2 groups, I didn't adjust my support staff hours at all,
Mm.
knowing my finances were going down. But I've always kind of budgeted based on intuition, not on like
Mm.
actual spreadsheets, which is not a good idea. And so like last April is kind of when it came to a head, where I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I'm out of money. And it was terrifying. It was a gut punch. It was one of these like, I can't believe I let this happen. Like this was so preventable. Like this was knowable. And I just wasn't paying close enough attention.
Yeah. I think though we're so hard on ourselves and
Yeah.
whatever point it is that, we hit failure, oh my God, let me blame myself. This is so terrible. For you, there's a lot of factors that went into what happened in your business. And you, at the end of the day, it's almost like if as a child you had to be parentified and you had to come up with a reason for everything, the
Mm,
first thing you grab is I wasn't paying attention. And that's not the only thing that happened.
mm.
But this is why I see PTSD is more common in people that are autistic, are ADHD, because the way that we experience life, we don't think about how, oh, it's my brain and the synaptic connections that are altered. It's me. It's my lack of discipline and willpower. And I think what's been very unhealthy, as someone who's also an entrepreneur, and my focus is shame-free wellness. I talk a lot about uncovering the shame in your business and uncovering the shame in your personal life. And I don't think that people have to go around having price tags on everything that they do and be completely transparent. But the lack of transparency to me is really unhealthy because you don't get to see other people that are having the same struggles that you are. So when you have them, you feel like it's just you and there's no one to blame but you.
Yeah, and I learned that I have this tendency to take so much ownership of stuff, even when it's not my shit to
Yeah.
own.
Yeah.
And part of this was also during a time where I was trying to make sense of some, relationships that had tarnished, and
Yeah.
was really kind of confused by a lot of those
Yeah.
because some of these relationships they
Yeah.
just stopped communicating with me and gave me
Yeah.
no reason really why.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that was my childhood.
uh,
That's how most of my friendships ended.
it's seriously like for any for anyone listening, if we're ever in a relationship and I do something that kind of pisses you off, will you just please give me the courtesy of letting me know what I did? Because oh
Yeah.
my god, because I was making up stories for years, honestly, trying to
Yeah.
figure out what the hell I
No,
did.
I still do that. I mean, I spent last year doing that, and, the relationship I learned, was a friendship, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, because the one thing I hadn't thought of was this person changed too. Their needs changed, and they were living, what they needed to. But in our heads, it's all us.
Yeah,
So, yeah, you had a lot of different things happening. Do you want me to tell you something crazy I did with my finances and my business to make you feel better?
you bet I do.
Okay. So one year I was like putting together my finances and I'm trying to like, I'm a stay out of jail girly. So I'm like trying to get my tax payments right. And instead of sending my estimated tax payment to the IRS, based on like, this is what I owe for this quarter, I sent them like, it was some weird calculation. I don't want to say it was all of my revenue, but it was pretty much, yeah, it was huge. I think I took the calculation for the year. That's what it was. all my revenue for the year instead of the quarter, and I sent it to them. And they were not gonna give it back. Of
Ah,
why would they? We have it, right? So, my accountant's like, "Well, I guess you're paid up for this year." But I'm like, "Oh my god, I just out leveraged my business, and it's because I'm tired." I'm sitting here trying to do this math, and I'm tired. I mean, I can think of a billion other mistakes that I make. I run my business in a much more conservative manner than most people do because I really have to when you have autism and ADHD, Murphy's Law is astronomical.
mm,
And I just am very risk averse and protective with myself, not because I think I'm gonna make mistakes all the time, but because I feel like that whole world moves a little too fast for me. People are always
yeah.
trying to, like, sell you stuff, always trying to get you to do the next thing, and, taking care of my mental health in my business means having grace for the things that I do differently because that's what works best for me.
Yeah, and I think that's been, grace, I think is a good word to describe it. I think one of the primary shifts for me since getting that formal diagnosis. Because for a while, I was like, I think it was around November. I think it was right after the CHAD conference, especially hanging out with a bunch of other AuDHDers, where I was just like, there's no way that I'm not.
It
Like,
was really funny because you were like, "Hi, I have ADHD," and then you, like, proceeded to hit it off with me and my best friend, and we're just like, "You're so like us, and this is so awesome," and nobody's gonna address the elephant in the room, we're just gonna let you chill. No, because I think, you brought up Devin Price, like, that book was so huge for me, Unmasking Autism, right? And, it really helped me to understand myself, but it also helped me understand that other people have to be on their own journey, and it's not my job to tell them.
yeah.
So for me, I think just holding space and being your friend when you started to be curious, and I hope this is what I did, I hope that I was just, like, giving you your space to figure it out in your own time, right?
Yeah, and I always talk about the power of community and like being with others who like do the same kind of quirky, weird things. And
Yeah.
it's just this like feeling of I can just be completely my weird self and it's fine.
Well, you were I think at the first phase, you just really thought that you were super weird and we weren't. And we were like, "Oh, bless your heart, you'll get to know us." And remember how I was like, "I don't want you to text me," and, like, I had these boundaries that I'm not gonna discuss, but, I have boundaries, and I was like and so your boundaries were the opposite, and it was like, "Okay, well, we're gonna be friends, so we're gonna figure this out." But I think it was beautiful because, we just let each other be.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm in this moment, I am thinking about the way for us all to move forward and to really amplify, the message of autism awareness and acceptance is to think about our entire life in terms of, like, universal design. And I actually picked this up, recently talking to someone, in our faculty community that's been, like, working on, programs to help us do a better job of teaching students who are neurodiverse. But the point is most of the things that are good for us are good for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the less shame that we have around the things that benefit us, it's gonna benefit everybody.
Yep.
Text messages started off as a implement for people who are hard of hearing,
Mm.
and most of us can't
Oh,
imagine our
interesting.
lives without it now. Yeah,
Huh. I actually don't think I knew that.
it's crazy. It's
That's
like, oh, I think that a lot of the things that we hold shame about and we hide, the first step is to realize, like, other people if I feel shame about something and I'm hiding it, chances are other people are feeling the same way about that. And if we can get out what we're dealing with and get help for it, so many of those things that people think of us as being inconveniences to them would actually be assets to all of humanity.
oh, so true. Mm. Yeah, earlier I was talking about how there were like over the last 5 years, there was like these certain sort of moments that were kind of like, let me put a pin in that because that's significant. Last summer, I ended up actually not leading a group because of low registration, and I had two of my coaches. They each were doing a group as well, and I only had like two people like sign up for my section. So I'm like, and I already was like so desperately needing a break because I was just feeling so just exhausted. And so I was like, okay, this wasn't one I was planning on doing it, but let me make lemonade. Right. Really, thank goodness for that because I really did need that time off. But so during that summer, I think I'm kind of a fanatic Fish fan, the band, and I've seen them like 53 times now, and I have tickets for 3 nights in June, and I'm hopefully going to be bringing my son to his first Fish show.
Oh, how sweet.
So I'm excited about that. I'm already having to mentally prepare myself to potentially have to leave early. Because something I told my current partner when we first met is if you ever come to a Fish show with me, like we don't leave early unless you're like literally dying. And she thought I was kidding, and I wasn't.
How do you handle the crowds?
It's funny because it's like it's this being around all these other people that I don't actually have to engage with in any way, and
Oh,
and
yes,
I
I
can
am
be
familiar with that.
and I could be weird as shit, and I'm actually
Okay.
blending in.
No,
Like,
I totally get that.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Mhm, mhm.
One of the things that happened over the summer is there was 2 weekends in a row. So one I went with, my partner, and then the other weekend I did solo. And I did the solo one, I was in Indiana, and I went on my motorcycle. And so I think it was like the second night, and I'm dancing, and I'm really into it, and, I'm like one of those, like, those weird hippies that dance at shows for, like, all kinds of movements, and it's like, "Huh? Yeah,
Wait,
that's how I
you're so
move."
not supposed to do that? I mean,
Well,
that's what you're there for.
that's exactly what I'm there for. And so I was totally in my own world, like in the music,
Mhm.
and I was noticing just like that a lot of my dancing is kind of like very hand flappy. And
Oh,
and so and keep in mind I've been in EMDR, so I think that part of this was like triggered this memory.
wow.
And that was I used to do a lot of like kind of hand
Wow.
flapping when I was a kid, and my sisters teased me for it. And I think I
Wow.
suppressed it. And it was like this flood came back, and I just started like really getting into hand flapping, like, at the show, and
Wow.
it just felt so good and grounding,
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
and it was just like, "Oh my god." I think it was one of these moments where I was like, what else have I been masking?" Like,
Yeah.
and so that was a really significant thing for me, and then I think
Yeah.
it was in, I don't know, maybe late summer, early fall, I was doing I think it was one of my community happy hours that I do once a month with my
Uh-huh.
alumni, and, one of our members had shared that they had just gotten diagnosed, with autism, and shared, where they got the evaluation, and I had, like, just saw an ad for, like, this place,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
day or the day before, and I'm like, "Wait a
Yeah.
minute," like, I'm a pattern noticer, and I'm like,
Which, by the way,
so I went and looked into it, and I was like, "Oh my, that's like, it's covered by my insurance, it's actually super affordable." And so I went through I don't think it's in every state, but I'll
yeah.
mention it, and they're not sponsoring me in any way.
Okay.
They can though. Prosper Health, and so I did this. It
Yeah.
was, I wouldn't say it was like the full battery evaluation, but
Mhm.
it was we had 3 sessions total. One was like 90 minutes, another was like 2 hours, and then there was the last one. And it was just like it was a really interesting experience of,
Yeah.
as we're talking about the different, like, things from childhood, and, what was the part where it was when we started talking about pet peeves?
Mm.
I was just like, "Oh, yeah, and there's this. Oh, yeah, and there's this. Oh,
Oh,
yeah."
yeah.
And
Mhm.
I'm just like, and it's interesting because there's so much of stuff from my childhood I think I've just blocked
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, I feel like when I went through my diagnosis, which by the way, I also was able to find an affordable option, and I definitely wanna advocate for that because people just think, "Oh, I can't do this,"
Yeah,
right?
because they
The
think it's
costs are
thousands of dollars,
astronomical.
right? And it doesn't have to be.
Right. Nope, I have a center in my state, and she works very hard to make it very affordable, and I'm very fortunate for that. But it was like looking through your rearview window of, like, every part of my life. Is this why I sucked my thumb till I was, like, 6 years
Mhm.
old? And is this why, like, I never wanted to go to the restroom and, like, and I didn't wanna eat this food and it wasn't to the extreme that I'd heard other people do it, but there were all these consistent patterns. And I had these conversations with my mom, and she's like, "Yeah, you actually didn't really say more than, like, a sentence, at a time, until you were 5 or 6 years old." And can you imagine a part of my life when I was ever not talking? I know, right? I almost made him spit, just so you guys know. You breathing over there? When you get told, and I guess I kinda wanna bring this up in the ADHD too, right? "Oh, if you didn't do all this before you were 12, then this isn't you." Well, if I was socialized to norm, and
Right.
it was survival to not do these things, then, I'm gonna be this hardcore people pleaser that does all the things right. But I think it becomes the clues to take care of ourselves, because the first time in my life, I feel like I actually am starting to know what I want in terms of fashion, in terms of spending my money, and now I can be intentional and not as reactionary. But therapy and meds, EMDR, just like you said. Can I tell you where EMDR really locked in with me and I decided it's something I wanted to do?
Yeah.
Okay, so Yvonne Orji, who played Molly on Insecure, had a comedy show on, HBO, and one there, she talked about how amazing EMDR was for her life, and I'm like, if it's this exciting for her, I kinda gotta go see what this is all about, and it really helped me to start to release all these things I've been holding in my body, and I think that it's interesting that for you and me both, EMDR was the gateway. And I remember telling the person that I worked with, I think I want to go an assistant for autism. They didn't see it. But by then I had more confidence to say, no,
Mm.
I need to get to the bottom of this.
It's interesting. You probably have heard the idea that a late diagnosis doesn't change the
Mm,
past, but it does change our understanding of the
absolutely.
past. And when you were talking about that, I just had this kind of light bulb moment.
Mm,
So there's a story that I would tell when I give
mhm,
presentations sometimes. That was a story from when I was actually in preschool,
mhm.
where I got into the car with my mom, and I told my mom that I don't think my teacher knows my name, and she says, "Well, why?" I'm like, "Well, because she keeps calling me Don't Eric." And I'm like, at first, I just thought that was
So
like a very
precious.
funny sort of ADHD
What?
thing, but I'm like, oh my God, I think I took that actually very literally. Like, and that just occurred to me. I'm like, wait a minute. Didn't actually click that I was being actually genuine when I
Yeah.
said
And
that.
I also think of how much of your behavior was problematized, because people didn't
Yeah.
understand. I remember, them telling my mom in preschool, "Portia refuses to learn how to read." And my mom's like, "Well, then let her." And so we would run, me and these other 2 girls, they called us the 3 Musketeers, and we would run around where everybody else learned how to read. But it's the persistent drive for autonomy, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I get to kindergarten and they tell her I'm reading, and my mom's like, "She doesn't know how to read." It's like, "I had to wait till I was ready." And I've been like that all my life, and that's why chores are so
Mm,
hard for me. It has taken so much help for me to accept help and then understand,
yeah.
if I don't arrange things in my life so that I know why I am doing them, so that the task is really clear, so that I have support, I'm gonna procrastinate all day because what I'm trying to avoid is this uncomfortable emotion. That's the kind of understanding that a diagnosis gives you. It's like learning how to understand how it's learning your operating manual.
Yeah.
And there's this moment where, you think, "Oh, are the people around me gonna be able to accept me?" But then you realize it's not my job. If you can't accept who I am, then that's not safe for me. And the
Yeah.
more of an advocate you become for yourself, the less you're waiting for everybody else to show up and do the job of validating you. And you start to realize that some people are actually going to love you for exactly who you are. And they don't.
And that's what's so beautiful about unmasking.
Yeah. And, for me, like I said, I feel like it was not my choice. It just fell off. And when I say that, I want to paint what that means. I can talk on stages in front of hundreds of people. But if you sit me
Same.
right, of course. If you sit me in a conference room with, like, no outdoor, like, light, and I've been in there for about 3 hours, I'm gonna have a meltdown.
I
And
got like literally anxious just like like thinking about that experience of when I
so
felt it in
yeah.
my body.
So when I talk to people about, coming to speak, I need to come in early, I need to transition, I don't need to do anything high energy right before I go on stage. I'd like to be calm and grounded because when I'm talking to other people and really connecting with them deep on their journey, I have to follow myself out. So my self-care is
Mm,
starting the night before. And then after, I need to be able to do whatever is best for me. And sometimes it does mean I want to hang around. But I'd like to get to know people, see how the vibe is, and then pull away for a bit. And when people were like, "Well, are you an introvert or extrovert? And you either love people or you don't," like, that didn't work for me because what I know now is I absolutely love being around, people in the speaking environment, but where I love to be when it comes to really, like, transformation is in really small groups where people feel safe going deep because that's how I feel safest.
And it's interesting. It took me a while to realize, like, with my sort of the core of my business is doing group, and I love doing group, and partially because like I'm leading the agenda,
Mhm,
and like I kind of know where it's
mhm,
going, and I know
mhm.
where we can go sideways, like in a way that works, and it's structured,
Yeah.
right? And I love leading group. What was really over the last number of years as my business grew, I found, like, when we had team meetings, I love the people on the team, but I hate the team meetings
Mhm.
because I would get so drained from them, where it's literally like I felt I was going into, like, negative energy,
Mhm.
like, by the
Yeah,
end of it, because there's too much
yeah.
executive functioning happening all
Yes,
at
that makes
once.
sense.
And part of my focus this year is about, like, basically restoring my energy.
Mhm.
And so, like, so I've very intentionally not been trying to like rescale up the business.
Yeah,
I'm right now, my primary focus is energy management,
right.
and just sort of like maintaining
Yeah,
business, without growing business for right now.
yeah,
And it's so interesting too, because as kind of thinking about this conversation that we were going to be having and talking about, really for a number of years, a lot of the vulnerabilities that I shared earlier on in the podcast, I kind of started to bring things closer to the chest
yeah,
because I was still in process, and
absolutely.
and I'm always been someone who thought the whole idea of like as a mental health professional, like because some schools of thought said you shouldn't share anything of yourself, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that's such
No,
bullshit. Like
no.
like
You
we're
can't
human
connect with people,
beings.
right.
Yeah, so I don't ascribe to
Yeah.
that approach, but I've always been so like there's this part of me that was like, well, if I'm telling the world that I'm also autistic, is that going to change how they think about like, how is this person going to be doing groups and being,
So,
and
I think that's what the awesome opportunity is, right? And so we are an enigma even to ourselves. I love structure and I hate it. I love being on big stages, and then I love working with, like, really small groups of people. I'm that person that, like, knows everybody, but I wanna be talking to 2 or 3 of them. And that
Mhm.
you experienced that of me at the conference, right?
Yep.
Um, and I think that the more visible we are about the ups and downs, the highs and lows of our process, the safer it becomes for other people to own all of who they are because we don't unmask just so that we can come get into the AuDHD mask. What are the rules? What do we do? What do we don't do? What do I like? What I don't like? I was asking you about the concerts because I used to love going to the Hollywood Bowl. And we went this past year to see Trevor Noah, and my husband and I looked at each other, we were like, "We are not okay. There's just too many people here." And
Mm.
what I realized was if I go back, I actually need to sit in a particular section because there's a particular
Mm.
section that doesn't give me the heebie-jeebies, and that's because there's actual seats. But,
Mm.
you mentioned context shifting earlier. My best description of context shifting was when I would go to the gym, and then I would sit in the car and not even drive home, or I would drive home and sit in the driveway. My body doesn't move until I'm safe. And for
Mm.
years, I would just push it and make it move. And part of building trust with my body now is like, well, you have to stop committing to so many things, which is hard because ADHD, we love to run from like burnout to like, oh, we're better. Let's go back and get busy again. But now I have real concerns about avoiding autistic burnout, right? So when it comes to my business, how do I right scale it? How do I have the
Mm.
offers that I need to bring in the energy that I'm giving out in equal proportion? And that doesn't mean that I have to do this in a way that doesn't align with my values. But all of that to say, the littlest things can be so hard getting up and
Yeah.
moving from one activity to the next. And if I
Yeah.
don't have the tools to help myself make those transitions and grace for the times where I absolutely can't, all the things that we've discussed in this call, all the amazing things that we don't do them. We cease to function. We don't
It's
so
true.
even think about how we both had to take care of ourselves to come on today's call. Think about how intentional we were with the activities that we chose.
Yeah. Partially one of the main reasons I went into started doing EMDR is I was finding myself kind of dissociating a lot. Like where I was just checking out and my brain was just going somewhere else. And when I would kind of get stuck in that mode,
Yeah.
and I was like, "What is going on? Like this seems to be happening more and more."
The mask is
And
falling off.
kind of, yeah. And may I tell you that that first 6 months of EMDR, I felt like I was like walking around with just like this exposed wound. Like
Wow.
it was so hard.
And I think that's why people are scared of it sometimes, but EMDR is really different for everyone. And for me, I had done so much work over the years. What I was lacking was that body connection to be able to get my body back to a place of safety where it wasn't storing all of these like memories, right? And getting triggered constantly. And now I have other ways. I meditate, I sit with myself. Like you texted me, like, what you're doing. I was like, I'm in deep meditation. Like, who answers their phone to say that? I don't know. But I do it so often, right? And I've had to take away the rules because when I have rigid rules, the ADHD part of me is like, nope.
Mm.
So, like, right now, I know planners don't work for me, but I'm craving a planner because I wanna, like, play with it for 3 weeks and then let it die because it's gonna be a fun 3 weeks. So I think, like, the asset to me of this whole lifestyle that we did not get to choose is to consciously turn it into an adventure. And when you find somebody who gets you, you build community with each other and you build ways of being in the world, but then you will also own the fact that I am going to ruminate on the worst case scenario sometimes. I am gonna dwell on things. I went through my meds withdrawals this week because my pharmacy ran out. And
Ugh.
I'm like, wow, it's the beginning of the quarter and I'm just gonna sit here and have vertigo and stare at a wall.
Ugh.
And I get what I'm getting at is we don't say those things enough. Instead, we wait until we're better, and then we show up as if everything's perfect, and then someone
Yeah.
else with ADHD sits in shame.
For me, the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 months of
Or
the podcast that I have not been releasing on a regular basis, I'm gonna tell you, there was, over the last year, there were moments where I'm like, "Should I just get a job and throw in the towel?"
did you feel like you couldn't do this anymore?
There was absolutely a part of me that felt like I couldn't do this anymore.
So, I felt that too, and I felt for me, it was like, how do I be this, like, speaker and coach and, like, professor that's, like, getting up being like, "So I'm getting treated for depression right now." But you know what I found out? People came up to me. One person came up to me after a talk and they said, I have kids. I couldn't convince myself to get help for depression. But after hearing you talk today, I think it might be worth it.
Mm.
So I want to ask you, what made you feel like you should stop?
I think just, like, my mental health was getting so bad because I just kept pushing, and or, like, I was definitely for so long in the mindset of, like, yes, entrepreneurship and growth and,
Yeah.
and financial freedom and, like and, then I kind of got to this point where I was like, "I fucking hate capitalism." Right? Like, I just wanna, like, stop the Ferris wheel for, like,
Yeah.
a year and just breathe
Yeah.
and, like, recoup, and so it's been super interesting, and I remember doing this episode. I think it was like a solo episode. I don't know, it was maybe 4 or 5, 6 months ago, where I share that my hope is that I'm gonna share the process of like kind of being in the messy middle, being in the, or like I'm not on top of my game at this moment. Then my hope is to guide that like we don't have to get stuck there. Like it
That's
is a
right.
process. And even when I did that, I was like, shit, what if I do get stuck?
And
Like,
you will. I get stuck all the time.
and so I mean, so my formal diagnosis, it was only a couple weeks ago, like when I
Yeah.
got the official report. And even though I was starting to self-identify as
Yeah.
AuDHD even before that, there was still this imposter part of me
Yeah.
that was like, yeah, but without that actual,
Mhm.
report that says it.
Mhm.
So for me, it's been fairly recent, but I'll tell you one of the big shifts for me has been around self-compassion and around like and what that really, really means for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
'Cause I remember the session that I had my report, the report session where they talk about the findings and everything. About halfway through, so my therapist uses a combination of IFS and parts
Yep.
work,
Yep.
right, and
Mine too.
EMDR. And it's about so one of my parts I call the void, and
Mhm.
the void is my dissociative part.
Mhm.
And about halfway through this session, even though I knew what was going to be shared, like this wasn't a surprise,
Mhm.
I like the void just kind of took over.
Yeah.
And so about halfway through, I was just like not really processing what was happening.
Yeah.
And I kind of, for the rest of that day, like really got like shut down.
Mhm.
And which was kind of, in a sense, it was surprising to me. It was also, I had a very similar reaction when my son was actually officially diagnosed with autism when he was little.
Mm.
Whereas like I knew what we were going to be told. And then as soon as they said, yes,
Yeah.
autism, I was like, I don't think I heard anything after that.
Yeah.
But it was like, so that evening, it was, I don't know, close to 9, maybe 10 o'clock at night, and I'm about to play the piano. It's like, maybe this will help me snap out of it.
Mhm.
And I remember just thinking that I'm 44 years old
Mhm.
and I've been autistic my whole life and I
Yeah.
didn't know it.
Yeah.
And how hard that's been.
That's right. And that was you advocating for yourself.
And then this like this sort of shift of like, it's like, damn,
Mhm.
look at everything I've actually been able to do
Mhm. Mhm.
with this,
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
mask that in a sense was strangling me without
Yeah.
really
Knowing it.
realizing it.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I'm actually kind of a badass. And it was, I don't know what it was about that moment
Yeah.
for me. I was just like, you know what? Like, I have so much to offer and so
Mhm.
many
Mhm.
strengths.
Mhm.
And yes, I have I'm grieving this
Mhm.
part of my past that
Mhm.
that
That's right.
all like the lack of
Mhm.
friends that I was able to
Mhm.
maintain,
Mhm.
because I didn't know. And even some professional relationships that have
Mhm.
soured because I did not know.
Yeah.
I had someone that gave me feedback that are like, you seem to only reach out when you want something. And I was like, I I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah.
And like that was really hard to hear.
Yeah.
Because it's not how I want to show up in a relationship.
Yeah.
But like for me, my social battery doesn't hold a charge very long.
Mhm.
And so the idea of like the steps and the things involved in reaching out to maintain
Mhm.
relationships
Mhm.
seems like it's a task
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
Right. Which
Yeah.
is why I kind of just want to live in a commune where
Yeah.
everyone's just there
No,
and
you
I don't have
don't.
to put in. Is this from an experience?
Yes. No. But
Oh,
I guess my point is like there's times where we need a break even from ourselves, but we do need a communication strategy. And what I tell people is I am your low maintenance friend. Don't come to me and apologize because you haven't talked to me for 6 months because I can be very like, I forgot this relationship existed, but I think you're amazing. And so I've had some people over the time, tell me, "Oh, I feel like you're neglecting, you're not putting your time in." I'm like, "Thank you. I'm so glad you were honest about that. What do you need?
yeah.
Because this is what I can offer." And I think for me, I spent my entire 20s in grad school, so most of my friends were used to being second, you know? Um, but everything that you've listed off is like, you're becoming the person you were supposed to be. The difference now is self-awareness and accountability. Like, that's what I've seen reflecting back on, like, the past 6 months of our friendship. Um, you are in a place where you want to be aware of how you're showing up in the world and what the impact has been, and then you want to be accountable. And I think you're being very brave using your platform and saying, "Ha, ha, ha, I named a podcast ADHD Rewired, and oh my god, I'm autistic. I don't really know what to do with that," because that's what life is. And it really allows you to offer that grace to other people because there's other people that are listening and they're like, "Yeah, self-awareness is very scary. Accountability is very scary. It's very scary when I make these plans and I do these things and then life evolves." And I think you're showing people how to be brave and it resonates with the people it's supposed to.
I hope so. Because it's when I started ADHD Rewired, it was really driven by this feeling of just the awfulness of feeling like you're not understood.
Yeah.
And if this podcast, continues to help people hear their own story coming out of somebody else's mouth,
Yeah.
and given all those sort of Me Too,
Mhm.
relatable
Mhm.
experiences,
Yeah.
that to me is like I just feel so grateful and humbled that I get to do such meaningful work,
Mhm.
and I am so committed
Mhm.
to managing my energy because for sure I don't ever want to experience that. And it wasn't just burnout. Like I now realize it was autistic burnout.
Yeah.
And it's awful.
Mhm,
And I'm just so committed
mhm.
to doing what I need to do to, maintain my boundaries and my
Yeah.
energy. Like even so once a month in my alumni community, we do a social happy hour. And, I feel weird about sharing this. So for the last like year, like every time I see that on my calendar, I've been like, oh fuck, like happy hour, which like was part of how I was feeling, and also I love the irony of like it's happy hour, and I'm
Right,
like
right.
ah. And what I realize is it's at 5:30, at night, so it's the work day is sort of coming to an end.
Yeah.
My meds have worn off. I'm spent,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
And then I felt like I had to sort of be in this
mhm,
performative
mhm,
role.
mhm, mhm,
And so, this most recent happy hour, right at the start, I just said, I'm going to be here for an hour.
mhm,
And at the hour mark, I'm just going to duck out.
mhm.
And I was sharing it, and it felt so good to
You were
just be
able to
able
make it
to,
happy again. I think that's a perfect metaphor. That is such a perfect metaphor. You love this community. You don't want to be drained, but instead of just throwing it out, you started to be honest about what you actually needed. And I think it's a stronger parallel even for your whole platform because ADHD shouldn't be this thing where it's like, oh, well, you have autism too. You're kicked out of the club now. I think you're showing everybody that this needs to be expansive. We're at a point where, a couple of years ago, you couldn't even get diagnosed with both. You could only have one or the other. And now
yeah,
we're
it's
like 10
true.
years down the line. Are we going to be like recognizing this as one larger thing? We don't
Well,
know.
I remember, when just the DSM-5
Mhm,
discussion groups
mhm.
where they were sort of exploring the idea of being able to have a co-occurring, autism and ADHD.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is so strange that in the DSM-4 it doesn't, because I think I had one client
Mhm.
ever who I would say just had pure, at the time was
Right.
Asperger's. And I
Right.
was like, but they don't have
Yeah.
any like
But that
ADHD
tells
kind
you
of
about the
traits.
biases of the people who are writing it, and that's why I always say diagnosis is political. The very criteria are based on things that we supposedly do wrong differently. It it
Yeah.
it isn't like it's written by us. I think it would be defined so differently. It would be more empowering if we actually were to write down what this is through the lens of, like, ourselves, right? And I think that you are actually in a beautiful way positioned to take that journey and say, "Yeah, I know these are the criteria. I know they're still gonna be here, but I'm gonna offer to you what my process is for me, and then I'm gonna welcome you to reflect on where you are, and we can all learn from each other." We shouldn't be putting all
Yeah.
the power to define this in the hands of people that probably don't even have these diagnoses themselves.
It's, just really recently I had, because I'm, so if you look at my Audible library over the last like 12 years, like it's almost diagnostic in itself. Because like when I'm interested in a topic, like you will see like a year or two of just books on that one topic, and that's it. Like I don't kind of bounce around topics. Like I remember even my first ADHD conference, I literally got like a suitcase full of books that I bought,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I read all of them.
yeah,
Right? Like this is what I love mastery. I love like
yeah,
knowing every like
yeah,
nook and cranny of something.
yeah,
And so I've been sort of back into the autism world.
yeah.
This book I was listening to was talking about echolalia, which is so in autism, echolalia, for people who don't know, is sort of the repeating of sounds and words and phrases.
Yeah.
Often like just it can sometimes be random.
Mm,
But then in this book, it talked about how echolalia sometimes can be your internal voice.
mm.
And I was just like, wait a minute, what? I think you just have the same reaction as
Oh
I
my
did.
gosh.
Because I'm like, oh my God, I've been doing that my
Oh, that's what it
entire
is.
life.
And
Like
by the way,
even sounds I hear, I like echo it in my head. Like,
Mhm. By the way, what you just did and that moment that we just had together, for people who are listening that don't have, autism or ADHD, that's what it feels like. We're always like, "Is that a thing? Is that a thing? Is that a thing?" I used to memorize license plates. I can still tell you a license plate that I memorized when I was 11 years old. I don't know why.
license plate, I don't memorize them, but when I see a license plate, I always like in my head, I read all the digits on the license
Right,
plate. Like
right.
always,
And
always,
I
always.
just figured I was bored and, it's so misunderstood. And I think that, for you, an opportunity is like to even be in an open dialogue about the things that are frequently misunderstood and all the different ranges in which they can be expressed, just to get us out of this two-dimensional understanding. I just think that there's so much more needed because I tell people sometimes I can't really tell you what this is because I'm living it. Like I can send you to a website that's gonna explain how, I my first priority is me right now, and I am figuring this out. So I think that there's a fine line where you're giving yourself the space and protection that you need, and then as
Yeah.
you have safety, you're sharing the things that you can. But you don't owe anything to anyone. You don't owe people a clear narrative of this is who I am and I'm never gonna change and I'm gonna hold constant for you. That's enabling them.
Yeah.
They need to learn
Yeah.
how to deal with change too.
Have you had the experience yet of sharing with someone your ADHD diagnosis and them like thinking that you must have already known this for a while, or like, do you know what I mean? Like, because I've over the last several months, as I've
Yeah,
been talking to different people,
yeah.
I've had a few people who said to me, "Oh, I thought you knew."
Oh, I don't think
Yeah,
people around me are that educated about autism. Like, I'm not getting a lot of that. Oh, that's
yeah,
like, okay, so you knew and you didn't say anything, right?
yeah, and that's shitty.
But no, it's not. But think about it this way. I'm big on consent, right? I don't wanna
Sure,
walk up to somebody and be like, "Hey, you should get this checked out."
fair.
But if you're a friend and you say, "Hey, I've been," and this is kind of how it played out for us, right? You were thinking about it, you were asking questions about it, but the only person that should be, like, going down that path of diagnosis is you. But, yes,
Yeah.
it was bad the way that they brought it up. But the
Well, but I'll tell you with one of the people, I was trying to resolve a conflict,
Yeah,
and they weren't really open to hearing my perspective,
yeah,
and I was being very vulnerable, and I was sharing that, like, I've actually realized over the last year and stuff that I both am doing the EMDR, but also realizing that I'm also probably likely autistic, and this person that says, "Well, I thought you knew that. I've known that about you for
no, that's
years."
not cool.
And
Mm-mm.
I was like, "Wait a minute. So you're saying that we've had this misunderstanding or different
Yeah,
of
yeah,
perspectives, and you're saying you understand
yeah,
autism,
yeah,
and you didn't like consider, hey, maybe this is part of what's going on. Maybe
right.
like
Because,
so."
again, they're in one of the Johari windows, right?
Hmm,
Can I talk about, like, shows on here that have helped me understand this better?
yeah,
Okay. So, Love on the Spectrum,
I love it. I love it.
right? And I know a lot of people don't, but we are so excited to watch this show because I think it helps us to understand ourselves in ways. And there were 2 characters, and I'm not gonna, like, spoil it for anybody, but I really admired them because they had the ability to tell people that what wasn't for them. I don't want to be in a
Yeah,
relationship with you. I'm not feeling this. That was the hardest thing for me all my life. Ending a relationship, ending a job.
me too.
Even now, it takes exceptional energy and bravery for me to not over explain myself and to just let it. And it goes into how you do business, your rates and all of that, right? And I used to put so many barriers because it was like your brain, and this is what people don't understand, the way that rejection sensitivity plays out. If this person rejects me or isn't happy with me, I'm going to die. That's literally how our brain feels.
Mm,
People don't understand that emotional pain. And so they're like, "Just grow up, just do it, just do that." And they don't understand, well, why won't you go renew, you know? I and that's the tax that we pay, right? I
yeah.
Me getting on the phone, and I like being on the phone, but there's certain conversations where I don't know exactly what I'm asking for or how to do it. And so I'll get on the phone and say, I know I needed to make this call for a while, but I was delaying and I kind of need your help with this. And I'm so much nicer to customer service now because I'm not trying to prove that I have the answer. And when they realize like how nice I'm being, they're so gracious.
Mm,
And so I'm realizing all my life, I expected myself to have all the answers to be able to do everything right because that is how my brain was programmed. And now I'm realizing the slower I move and the more loving I am, genuinely the better my life is and genuinely the better I contribute to the lives of people all around me. To me, that's been the key of like, why would I go through this whole journey?
So since your diagnosis, what would you say is the best thing that has changed for you since your diagnosis?
I genuinely like myself.
Love. Mm. Well, you are pretty likable.
Thank you. And being able to just like realize that fear isn't the end, rejection isn't the end, you know? You don't have to take care of everybody and do everything.
I think for me, I've been noticing it's a subtle shift,
Mhm.
but the relationship between me and my son has been, because he has a lot of different like quirky interests that, the ADHD part of my brain is like, okay, I'm bored. I can't do this with him. Like it's like I can't watch these videos with him. It's so
Yeah.
and like I
But
guess
you
like
get it better.
understanding the importance of engaging in those special interests.
Yeah.
There's this YouTube show he likes, called BFDI, Battle for Dream Island. It's like this character,
Yeah.
I think they're called object shows where
Yeah.
it's like a cup is a character and like
Yeah.
a spoon is a character. Whatever. So last weekend I'm like, hey, let's watch one of those shows.
Oh.
And just during this past week, 4 different separate occasions, he brought up how much he appreciated that. And
I think
it's
you're winning as a dad this week.
aw.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting, talking to my son about it too. Because my son, who's also AuDHD, um, he had said that since I've been talking more about autism lately, that even for himself, he historically has more identified with ADHD and not as much autism. Um, but he said that lately that's been kind of shifting, and so I'm like, is he just like like reflecting what he's seeing in me? And so how do I help him navigate, help him find his own self? But I also think like, he's in that age, he's in 8th grade.
Yeah.
So he's like becoming more aware of the social
But I think
differences.
you're also modeling that it is safe to be this.
Yeah.
If for years my dad was the ADHD guy, it wasn't safe for me to boldly explore this. But now that he is
Yeah.
too, he's tapping into your courage. I have a lot of people that I work around, in my various occupations that aren't going to go get diagnoses.
Mm.
And what I hope that they understand from me is like permission to see yourself and be who you are and where you are. And if there's anything that I say about executive function or systems, that helps you, then take that.
Yeah.
I don't have an agenda. The only diagnosis that matters is my own. And so I think that just reinforces like this is about you, but this is so much bigger than you.
Yeah. Mm. Now I'm like feeling myself go into that reflective mode of just like all these different, I don't know, different scenarios. And um, like even like something I've been doing recently at home, when my son's with me. So he is a verbal stemmer. Like he
Mhm.
is like there are sounds coming out of his mouth
Mhm.
from the moment he gets up to the time he goes like, and it's fine. Except I have auditory processing issues, and I get very overstimulated by, like, different
Yeah.
sounds and
Yeah.
stuff, and so I let him know, "Okay, I'm putting on my noise canceling headphones," and he's fine, and he's so funny too, because like, for a 13-year-old ADHDer, he has amazing self-awareness.
Yeah.
Like, he'll be like, "Is it okay if I monologue to you for a while?" Like, he knows I have the headphones in, and I'm like, okay, just know I'm not gonna really be able to hear. He's like, "That's okay. I just wanna talk about this."
Yeah, you're bringing up a lot about, me and my husband. So my husband got his diagnosis about 2 months after me, and it was
Mm,
mostly because, like, he saw my journey, and then I was like, "Hey, read this," and I tossed him over and just mapping off of them because I was seeing it, but again, I was like, "This isn't my place," and he has a lot more of the auditory stuff, and it was funny because I actually had an autistic writing coach, and he was willing to let my brain be, But he's like, in order for me to like really understand what you're saying, I need you to bottom line a bit more. And so I worked with AI to like learn how to like take what I was saying and condense it down.
Mm.
And then that actually ended up impacting our relationship positively.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So, but also, like you said, the headphones, I went out and I was like, we're both going to buy them. I did it as a solidarity move, but I was like, trust me, this is going to be good for me too. Right. For my guy, it's apples. That is not okay. Apples are like, so the sound, right?
Oh, okay.
I cut up apples now and I sprinkle them with lemon juice and cinnamon and just stick them in the fridge so that nobody's taking big. But it's like once you know what this is, and it wasn't easy. We really had to redo our communication. And we were 9 years in our marriage. We'd worked out a
Mm.
lot of things, but you try both people unmasking all of a sudden, right? And understanding, okay, how do we make space for each other's special interests and nurture that, right? If I'm listening and I miss something, being able to say, "Hey, I didn't process that. Can you run that by me again?" Instead of, "Oh, you're not listening. You don't care."
I mean, I've been doing that for years, but, like, where
Yeah,
I'm just like, I will own if I've like spaced out for a moment and
yeah.
like, can you just repeat what you just said? Because my mind just drifted.
The hard
But
thing for him is, he's not ADHD. And so that layer that I bring,
oh,
ooh, is a
interesting.
doozy. And God bless him, like, he's so good at it, but I'm like, the trains in my life would not run on time if I did not have I actually think of it mostly as, I think acceptance, you take all of it, right? But I can tell
Yeah.
you there's so much about both of us being autistic that benefits me.
And I love some of the research that has shown that autistic people together are actually great at reading each other and like, and where there's these mismatches, it's like neurotypical to an autistic. Um, for me, I think one of the best things about really knowing is that like I don't have to like just guess if I like understood someone correctly. Like
Yeah.
I've been just more directly asking, like, is this
Yeah.
what you meant by that? Or are you joking? Like,
Good
where
for
in the past
you.
I would think like I know they're joking. Like
No, I
now I'm
don't.
questioning it. I'm like, maybe they're not joking. I'm just gonna ask.
So I wanna ask you a question, and I'm gonna answer it for myself first. What is the hardest thing about this? And I think the hardest thing for me is, I know I'm on sabbatical this year. I'm healing. I'm writing my book. I'm, doing all these wonderful things. And as I go back into the classroom and I'm like, how do I not go back to Portia 1.0? Because everyone was so used to me just like, I'll do it. I got this. I got that. And now I've healed and I've got these super deep boundaries. And, I am starting to have really honest communications with people at my university. And that's really helping a lot. And I know it's going to be okay because I've like told my therapist, like, this is what we're going to work on together. And then I have my meds, which are awesome. But I just want to say that for the benefit of anybody else, it's like, it's not a magic wand and there's some things that are gonna be easy to address, and there's other things that are just gonna take, like, one day at a time and helping yourself, but also getting help from other people. So what's the hardest thing for you?
I think in some ways similar to you, it's like as I, continue to focus on sort of restoring my energy, I do think I will want to get to a point where I grow the business again in some way, but like being scared of getting burnt out again,
Yeah,
I guess doing that, or even like realizing like I don't have the capacity to do that, so I'm kind of treading very cautiously as I'm doing stuff in my business. It's like, look, success feels great when you grew up undiagnosed and you failed a bunch of stuff and you're like, hey, I can actually do shit. Right? Like, that feels amazing.
yeah,
Right. But I also don't want to be tying my worth to it. And,
yeah,
it's as much as I thought I think I had separated from that.
yeah,
I think when I got into my financial sort of
yeah.
my financial pickle last year, it was like, oh, like I think I have more work to do on
Yeah.
that.
Well, and, I think that's because it is an ongoing journey. Everything that you've
Right.
described, even as somebody who coaches around sustainable business practices, I coach on it because I have to do it constantly in my life, right? I
Yes.
don't wanna be successful, but, tarnish my relationships or compromise my health. And what that
Yeah.
means is knowing the warning signs, but you have to, ongoing monitoring, right? Okay, in this season, especially with AuDHD, because man, it changes up, right? Well, that worked for me then. This no longer works for me now. What is it that I need, you know?
So as I was saying, I was looking at the time, and I'm also noticing the beginning feelings of what I call fuzzy brain, which is when like, okay, I've been in this dialogue for a
That's
while, and
right.
my brain's starting to get tired. And I used to like that is the thing that I used to
And
ignore
push through
for and push through for
because
years.
society rewarded that.
And I think that if for me, I've been focusing very heavily on that feeling lately and like taking breaks between almost every meeting I have. And even just taking 5-minute breaks between every meeting is a game changer. It is a game changer. Like, I'm like, oh my God. Like, yeah, it's hard to get up from the chair sometimes because I get really
Yeah.
locked in.
Yeah.
Right. And please, someone invent the auto rejecting chair. I've been asking for this for years with a spike so you can't sit back down. Okay. So Portia, thank you for having this conversation with me. This has been, I don't know. I feel like I'm losing words now as I'm getting tired, but my heart is filled with gratitude
Thank you.
and love, and just I want to thank you.
Thank you so much. It was an honor.
Well, we'll have you back on at some point when your book's getting ready to come out. So definitely, start following Portia. So Portia Jackson Preston. What's your social stuff? Put it out there.
Portia's Journey, Portias Journey, Portia's Journey.
Awesome. Portia, thank you so
Thank you
much.
for having me.
All right. I know this was a long one. Thank you for continuing to listen all the way to the end. I edited this podcast, which I haven't been doing a lot of my editing in quite some time, but I do a little bit here and there. And this is the first time I think I edited a podcast right after recording the podcast. And although I did take a break, I really did take a break. And I hope that this was really valuable to you. So anyways, thank you for listening. If you related to some of the things that we were talking about, it might be worth exploring, learn more about it. And one more time, just as a super quick reminder, as I said, I wasn't going to do ads in the middle of this episode, and I didn't, but I'll do one more quick reminder that we have 3 spots left in our spring coaching groups, which start on April 24th. So learn more at coachingrewired.com. If you like this episode, especially this episode being that it's Autism Awareness Month, Autism Acceptance Month, share it. Please share this with others. I think this is a really important start of a conversation. And after we stopped recording, Portia and I were like, well, maybe this could be the start of a series. So I would love to hear from you. What did you think of this episode? Was there stuff that you wanted to hear that we didn't cover? Do you have questions? It would be lovely to have a dialogue with you as the listener. Also, if you're looking for some co-working, you can check out adultstudyhall.com. It's our virtual co-working community. And yeah, that's it. All right. My brain is tired and I'm going to wrap this one up. Just thank you so much. We'll catch you next time.